Hey there, YouTubers. So, this is one of my blogs. I have a blog called controlroom.blogspot.com, and it centers around the meme of, like NASA's Houston's Mission Control, and so many fictional movies have a control room. It's kind of like a situation room, but also the movie Control Room about Al Jazeera that kind of informed the beginning of the blog. I kind of named my blog, um, you could say, in memory of that movie, partly, or in a nod of the hat to that movie. So, in the last video, I was talking about futurism. My dad, he was an urban planner, a regional planner, and that got me thinking in terms of I flew in airplanes a lot too, commercial jets. Not saying I was a pilot or anything, but looking out a window, seeing the world from that perspective, where kind of like Disney here in front of his model for EPCOT, you're looking from a great height. And I think I was informed that way. And in recent videos, I've been talking about what is language. And I find philosophy hasn't really learned from Wittgenstein that much, in that they don't spontaneously like look at freeways and cloverleaf interchanges among freeways as a linguistic phenomenon. But I think if you understand the later Wittgenstein, you do understand what he means by language as a form of life. He doesn't mean that metaphorically, it's like physically. And we don't think termites are a language, the language termite, but you could say that it is. It's up to us how we use these words. Anyway, I'm going to hit the play button here for a second. I don't have sound turned on. So this is Disney. I'm doing more research. I just wanted to clarify because my last video, which I have embedded here underneath, which was coming from having watched Defunct Land quite a bit. Disney is, looking ahead to creating a city from scratch. And this has been my interest lately. In a lot of videos, you'll find I have a thread, Asylum City, which is, playing off this idea that with climate change and big disruptions, like Indonesia, I'm reading, is planning to move its capital out of Jakarta. Jakarta is sinking. We're talking about a city of 30 million people, if you count Greater Jakarta. These needs to construct and build on a very grand scale that makes Disney's projects look tiny, they're not going to go away. And Bucky Fuller had like Old Man River City as a proposal, which is like a super giant stadium. And I have, quite a few videos alluding to that as well. I think Fuller was one of our many great futurists. My dad was a futurist. We got Futurist magazine. I wrote my 8th grade paper on things like Club of Rome, which was, a think tank trying to figure out the future based on computer models, the idea of computer models. I like simulations. I like SimCity. I think if I were a Disney, I would be really encouraging sim games, like the games that sims are, but I wouldn't get so goofy like with the more academic. I know when I went to OSCON, they were talking about a simulation of electrical grids that we could run, but I know that would be too complex, really. I mean, that's going the other extreme, probably too dry. Something more kid friendly, but not having UFOs attack or whatever. SimCity got to be a little bit weird in that way, I thought. Anyway, great game. Can we do things like that? Can we build electrical grids in a game? So this is EPCOT. What we're looking at here is from another movie, not Defunct Land, but a really well done documentary by a guy who really does believe in Disney. I'll go to it so we can get the title. I didn't actually mean to jump forward there, actually, so let's go back to where I was. The thing to realize here is that Epcot, as Disney envisioned it, was never built. And by that, I don't mean that the theme park is not a good rendition of his vision. I mean, he had the theme park wasn't going to be the city that he was imagining was not a theme park. It wasn't about rides and stuff. It was about people living in his model city and prototyping for tomorrow, right? Getting prototypes to work. And it had concentric circles, it had people movers. This was before we talked about driverless cars, which, once you don't have tracks anymore, you kind of have to do everything with cars now because we don't have people movers as much. I think if you had a purely driverless car, it's really a lot like back to the idea of people movers, which might be easier to implement, really. But anyway, that's another discussion. I just want to say I like this cities from scratch boldness and listening to people talk about Disney a lot, especially this guy. Or is it this guy? Maybe not. Let's see if I can find him real quick. They interview the guy who builds the monorail for Disney, and I'm just amazed by his skills. Like the genius people that Disney attracted to work for him and with him, really high caliber, right? And this guy who built the monorail and the little Utopia cars, what was it called? Cartopia. And you know what he also built was the Lincoln Audio Animatron, which, it was falling on his face, but this guy comes along and saves the project, even though he's not in the design, as he says, of humans. Like he's a car guy. This is the gentleman who makes this movie, and he's a Disney fan like me. I really count myself as a Disney fan, more than ever, having done more of this homework. The monorail, Defunctland does a whole long video on just the building of the monorail, which I found extremely interesting. I don't know if they're supposed to be the transportation of the future or not. Elevated makes sense, but the thing about those monorails is how do you ever switch them? They seem with the big concrete design, sure seems like it's hard to ever switch them. This guy, this is the monorail guy. And he tells great stories, like the very opening day of the monorail when it's just been burning up. Up till opening day, they weren't getting the monorail to work right. And the very first day it opens, Richard Nixon and his kids get on for a ride, and Secret Service is freaked out because Nixon is vice president at the time. And as we learn later, that's I think around the time that the office of the vice presidency, they say it's powerless or that it's kind of like a nothing job, they say, but that's not really true. It's more, they say that because it's more of a covert affairs office. Like Nixon was working closely with Howard Hughes, and he was trying to overthrow Castro with secret armies and training the Cuban exiles and all this. And all that infrastructure was in place so that when Kennedy actually got elected, he was up against that kind of momentum that had already, all those wheels had already been set in motion big time under Nixon as vice president. And I think Nixon knew quite a bit about Kennedy's demise. And part of what Watergate was about was Nixon saying, if we don't put the lid on this, some of that stuff could come out about, the the secret teams and all that. I'm thinking back to Prouty and stuff, Fletcher, Jay Fletcher. I reference him quite a bit. America got kind of dark after Disney. Like he and Jim Henson both, had huge amounts of energy and very successful working style, attracted a lot of very talented people and got a huge amount done. They were both very, very, very productive, but then they both died sort of suddenly, like without a lot of warning. And without them, especially without Disney, a lot of things just he was really a great leader. As somebody says in this documentary, he's the best dictator we could have ever had, right? Because he wasn't a dictator. He just wandered around and talked to everybody and was very friendly, but had the vision. Anyway, just wanted to say I'm proud of the history that people like Disney give us, and I understand Disney's patriotism. And I'm wondering what he would. I wish he could be here and talk to us about what he sees today. All right, talk to you soon.